Everton's deck is another entry in the 2014 Indie Game Maker contest, and features a unique combat idea by utilizing a card-based combat system over the standard turn-based combat system that many of the other entries like Sword Sister used. But does this novel approach make for a better game, or is the game hampered by the poor execution of its own idea? Sadly, it's hard to discuss the plot of Everton's deck without giving too much away, since the game sells itself around its plot twists, which happen at both the beginning and end of the game. I will argue, however, that the plot twists feel poorly implemented in some respects, since the game doesn't take advantage of the opportunities that the opening plot twist creates, and denies itself this opportunity for no apparent reason. As stated previously, this game takes a novel approach to combat by implementing a card-based combat system, but this novel approach seems to be as much of a strength as it is a disadvantage, since the system comes across as poorly thought out in many respects. One of the most notable issues is the game doesn't allow you to hold onto a card for later use. Instead, you pull a fresh hand every turn and have to make a decision based on the options provided. This undermines the whole concept of drawing cards from a deck, in my opinion, since you'll always try to keep a card or two in your hand for later use. Because the game can't replicate this aspect of trading or collectible card games, you end up with a game that feels more like it's based on luck rather than on skill or strategy. Another issue that is hard to overlook in my opinion is that certain cards like Shuffle feel relatively useless, if not entirely pointless, while other cards like Attacking Guard don't feel like they belong in the card pool. The last part of my comment is a bit easier to explain, so I'll start there. The attack and guard cards represent basic commands, much like the use item command, and as such shouldn't be randomly available to the player, but always an option. The shuffle card is a bit more complicated, but in short I find it to be a rather useless card since it only adds spent cards back into your deck, but doesn't really give you any control over what will be in your hand for your next draw. If you combine this lack of ability to influence what you draw with the relatively high MP cost, you end up with a card that is almost entirely useless. If anything, the shuffle card should be replaced with the card that lets you draw a specific card on your next turn, or should be turned into an option that is always available to the player, much like the attack and guard command should be. On the plus side, the game does balance itself out rather well, so the final boss battle actually feels like a challenge while not feeling overwhelming, if you've done a little grinding in the swamps in order to buy a few more booster packs. And speaking of the booster packs, I'd recommend creating rarity ratios for the booster packs like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering. That way every pack includes one rare card instead of the player being entirely dependent on luck to acquire such cards. In terms of visuals, the game features some mixed tile work in my opinion, with the forest feeling a bit overly large, while other areas such as the ruins feel rather small and underdeveloped. Sound-wise, the game seems to feature the default resources that come with RPG Maker VX Ace, and while that means the game is filled with rather generic tunes that are decent, it also means that the music is rather forgivable since it doesn't stand out in any way from the norm. Everton's deck is an alright game in my opinion, despite all its flaws, but it definitely could use quite a bit of tweaking to make it something more than a simple time killer, even if it is an enjoyable one.